Thank you so very much. Fired up! Now, in the Baptist church, we have something that's called call and response. I'm going to call it, and I want you to respond. And this is the way we give people who are visiting our state of South Carolina welcome. So when I say fired up, you say, ready to go. All right, we got to have more enthusiasm than that. We got a big election in 2020. Fired up! Ready to go! Fired up! Ready to go! Fired up! Ready to go! Give themselves a round of applause. We're going to take back the White House in 2020, and it begins today. Fired up! Fired up!
Ready to go!
Fired up!
Ready to go!
All right. Now we're kicking. It is just such a great honor to be here today. This is the first town hall meeting of a series, and we hope to bring all of the presidential candidates to Senate District 42 because I believe it's in through my experience, I believe it would be a good thing for us to talk to all of them. And so the first candidate that accepted my invitation was Beto O'Rourke. I gotta tell you, the Republicans are nervous about Beto O'Rourke. And what we have to understand is we got to be together. And let's not buy the Breitbart narrative that begins to form and tear up and make divisions of our party. You know, I've been hearing a lot about, well, he doesn't have a policy position yet. Or he misstated this and misstated that. Beto O'Rourke is making headways in our country. He's charismatic, he's young, he's energetic, and let's not fall prey to the extreme right trying to tear down our good candidates. You can applaud for that. And so part of what I do, and part of Representative Pendarvis's job and all of the elected officials is be a gatekeeper. We need declared Democrats in the Democratic primary for president.
Yay!
And it's okay if candidates haven't all performed to a T their policy positions. What I'm looking for and what you should be looking for is someone who can win the electoral college map and move the agitator out of the White House. We got to win an election. We got to win an election in 2020. We got to win an election in 2020. And so this is the first. He has local government experience. He was a county councilman in El Paso. And for those of you elected officials, the local government experience is key. He was a congressman. I believe he won 3 consecutive terms. And then in a heavily dominated Republican state, he almost won United States Senate. He is the father. He's married to a beautiful lady. I saw her on the news station the other day talking about her background. He's married to a beautiful lady named Amy, and they got 3 beautiful children. young children much like mine. I got little Marlon, get some microphone. We're having a few microphone problems, but hopefully he will get it done. This is one of our local, you Brown? You Brown? All right, where's Brown? All right, Michael Brown, DJ Brown, he's Councilman Brown's brother. And so what we're gonna do, he has 3 children. And I know about father because I have my children here. Marley, raise your hand. Raise your hand. And Marlon, where's Marlon? He was crying, so they had to take him out. I want you to give this young man a round, warm South Carolina welcome. I want you to stand on your feet. He is our future. We need him in this election.
Yes, we do.
Beto O'Rourke.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Charleston. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Dr. Lassane, for helping to organize and to lead this conversation. I want to very briefly give you my gratitude and introduce myself and just tell you that the last 2 days in South Carolina have been absolutely transformational, not just for our campaign and my prospects as a candidate and my ability to serve you as president, but personally, the inspiration that we've taken from going to Rock Hill and meeting members of the Friendship Nine, listening to Willie McLeod tell his own story about galvanizing the conscience, not just of his community or this state, but this country, and getting us a little bit closer to the full equal civil rights of every single American. This morning, meeting with the Low Country Students for Political Action, who are our leaders on civil rights struggles today, issues of gun violence prevention, and an example that though they may be 16, 17, or 18 years old, they are not the leaders of tomorrow. They are the leaders right now of this moment here today, and I'm grateful for their leadership. Getting to see the great example of Joe Cunningham, so new in office, and yet already doing so much, ensuring that we do not have offshore drilling here in this state, outside of this community, doing everything in his power to close the Charleston loophole, to ensure those who should not have weapons in their hands do not receive them, saving lives in the process. The example set by the senior member of your delegation, a mentor to me in the 6 years that I was in the U.S. House of Representatives, Jim Clyburn, who leads by example, brings not just the Democratic caucus, but seeks to bring together the Congress around the most urgent, important issues of our day. He's someone whose lead I will also seek to follow, and getting to be in the communities that he represents, getting to meet some of his family members, the honor for me, the honor for our campaign, and again, a lesson for us in how to lead, how to be civil, how to be decent and dignified in our public discourse and in our national politics. And then, getting to spend some time with Representative Pendarvis yesterday, asking him the questions that have been asked of me, and I have not been able to answer sufficient to the satisfaction of those who pose them. How do we ensure that every American has a roof over their head, can afford to stay in the communities in which they grew up, are not priced out, taxed out, gentrified out of their hometown, their neighborhoods, to our success, to everything that we'll be able to contribute back to this country. And then lastly, every single thing that I think we want to do as a country, ensuring all of us can see a doctor, ensuring this economy works for everyone and not too well for the too few and not well enough for the too many, making sure that we meet the existential challenge of climate change, whose effects you are already experiencing here in Charleston, in the flooding that you see every time that it rains. The only way that we are going to be a match for this moment, the only way to call forth the genius, the resolve, the creativity of this country is to ensure that we employ the greatest mechanism ever devised by humankind, and that is our democracy. A democracy that we are perilously close to losing, a democracy that still does not have the benefit of every vote and every voice. Take it from someone who lives in a state that was ranked 50th in voter turnout, 50th by design, 50th because it was drawn that way, 50th because some people, based on the color of their skin, their country of national origin, were drawn out of their congressional district, drawn out of a reason to vote, drawn out of their democracy. Not only do we need a new Voting Rights Act, not only do we need to end the practice of gerrymandering, we must also get big money out of politics, and we must follow the lead of Senator Kimpson, who brings us together here regardless of our differences. If you are a Republican, you're in the right place. If you're a Democrat, you're in the right place. Independents, welcome as well. It's going to take all of us. We will not do this by half measures, but with only half the country. And to close where the senator began, come summer of 2020, we will all be on the same team. We will all be behind the same candidate, whoever she or he may be. Let's make sure they are successful in defeating President Trump and bringing this country together. Thank you for having us out today. Very, very grateful. Senator, thank you.
Right. I'm fired up. Are y'all fired up? Thank you so much. Your words really resonated with me, and I'm sure they resonate. I know they resonated with everyone else here today. So I have a two-part question. One, given all of these issues that mean a lot to us here in South Carolina and for people across the nation, why exactly are you running, and why do you think you should be the next president? And then the second part is very much related to where we are today. We're in the Holy City. We're in Charleston, South Carolina. I would say, if not the most important city in the United States history, but one of them. I mean, folks might not, some people came here first, maybe not by choice. But so my question is related to that and related to our racial disparities report that I know that you're familiar with. And since all of the issues that you touched on really have a deeper impact when you layer race and class on top of it, when all of those intersections are in play. So given that, and given the fact that African Americans make up 55% of the Democratic voting bloc here in South Carolina, why should Black people vote for you?
Dr. Lassane, thank you for the question. The first part of your question is, why am I running? Like the senator, I'm the father to 3 young children. Amy and I are raising Ulysses, who's 12, Molly, who's 10, Henry, who is 8. And more than we fear a national political campaign, more than we are mindful, maybe somewhat anxious of being in those debates, it is their judgment of us and what we do or what we fail to do at this defining moment of truth that we fear more than anything else. What I want to make sure that we do is tell our kids that when given the chance, when the window is still open to us, when we can still save this democracy, when we use every single day of the 12 years afforded to us to avert the worst catastrophes of climate change, that we did all that we could, that we stepped out and performed whatever service, gave whatever sacrifice we could. I want to make sure that in meeting every single one of those challenges, we bring this deeply divided, highly polarized, hyper-partisan country together on the common ground, enlarging it where we can, for the common cause, to achieve the common good. It is the only way, and in fact, it is the last best hope of not just this country, but of our planet. The only way we're going to do it is to do it together. So the way in which we campaign, going everywhere, saying to those, no me importa, I do not care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, to whom you pray, or if you pray at all, who it is that you love, how many generations you can count yourself an American, or whether you just got here yesterday. All that matters now is that we are here together. We are Americans before we are anything else, human beings first, and we have the chance to treat one another accordingly. To the second part of your question, as a white man in this country, it is only belatedly and only in part that I begin to understand the struggles of others. A criminal justice system that is the largest prison population on the face of the planet per capita, disproportionately comprised of people of color, many of whom arrived there on a schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline that began not in high school, but at 5 years old in a kindergarten classroom where a child of color stands 5 times the chance of being disciplined, suspended, expelled. A healthcare system that has left millions with no ability to see a doctor. But if you look at the maternal mortality crisis, just one of the consequences of our current healthcare system, it is 3 times as deadly for women of color in this country. And it is not just access to care. Very often it is when those women get care, the care is not sufficient. The bias that is brought in to the clinic, to the operating room by the providers, as hard as it is for us to talk about, must be squarely confronted. Whether it is education and ensuring that more teachers look like the students in front of them, whether it is healthcare, meaning universal, guaranteed, high-quality healthcare for all, whether it is a war on drugs, that has become a war on people, and on some people more than others. That prison population I just described, disproportionately comprised of people of color, so many there for a non-violent drug crime, too many for possession of marijuana, a substance that is legal in more than half the states of the Union. Now, Americans of all races, of all walks of life, use illegal drugs, including marijuana in those states where it is not legal, at the same rate. And yet, more likely than not, those arrested will be people of color. Those who do time will be people of color. Those who, upon release, will be required to check a box on every employment application form stating that they have a conviction, making it less likely that they get hired, making it almost impossible to qualify for a student loan to pursue higher education. Some more than others are bearing the brunt of this war. So I want to make sure, as you said, one issue is layered over the other. All of them intersect. We need to make sure that whether it is healthcare, economic advancement in a country where there's 10 times the wealth in white America than there is in black America, though black America, through their descendants, literally built the wealth in bondage to this country at the time. Whether it is criminal justice, we've got to make sure that we're up to this challenge. And the last thing that I'll say, though we did not win the Senate race, despite the help of so many who are here in this room, we got close, 2.6% for those who are counting. But the way that we ran that race, in a state that had previously been 50th in voter turnout, was to go everywhere, be for everyone, go to that county that voted 96% for Trump and show up because they are just as deserving of our respect, of being listened to, of being fought for, of being served. Going to that county that voted over 90% for Hillary Clinton and not taking them for granted and showing up for them as well. We saw voter turnout amongst young people in Texas up 500%. We saw members of Congress elected to offices that have long been held by Republicans that are now held by Democrats. And in Harris County, home to our largest city, Houston, Texas, the most diverse city in the United States of America, 17 African American women just won judicial elections, changing the face of criminal justice reform, literally. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to take the personal privilege to ask him one or two questions, and then we're going to let Dr. Lassane navigate through the audience. First, let me recognize Ken Riley, the president of the International Longshoremen Association. Ken, stand up. Highest volume of containers, I believe now in the country. Second and to Savannah. And so much due to the work of the union members who unload those ships in a very efficient manner. So, Special Counsel Robert Mueller delivered his report to the Department of Justice on yesterday, and I understand that Congress will be briefed tomorrow. Assuming there is, as we know, there have already been over 36 people charged with crimes. Several members of the Trump administration have been indicted or in the process of making their way to courts with potential jail time. Assuming there are some facts and evidence in that report which suggests that President Trump, at the time candidate Trump, fully knew that there was collusion or there was coordination with Russia. Do you think it's appropriate for the House and the Senate to discuss and focus on impeachment?
Thank you for the question. And it is a sober one. It is a serious one. 243 years into this experiment that is the exception on the planet and the exception in world history. You want to make sure that we carefully guard and jealously hold these institutions of our democracy and employ this mechanism of impeachment as an absolute last resort. Ultimately, that will be a decision for our representatives in Congress to make, all 435 of them, representing unique, distinct districts all over the country. But I'll tell you what I see from my perspective. You have a president who, in my opinion, beyond the shadow of a doubt, sought to, however ham-handedly, collude with the Russian government, a foreign power, to undermine and influence our elections. The sanctity of the ballot box, the ability for each and every single one of us to make informed decisions about those who seek to represent us and hold positions of public trust. It is beyond the shadow of a doubt that once in office, the President of the United States sought to obstruct justice first by firing the principal investigator into what had happened in the 2016 election, and then, in the light of day, tweeting at his Attorney General to stop the Russia investigation. If that is not enough, do not take my word for it. Take conservative columnist George Will's word for it. If you're wondering about collusion, then when you saw the President of the United States standing next to the leader of Russia on that stage in Helsinki, Finland, defending him and taking his word for it against our own intelligence community and our country, in George Will's words, not mine, that is collusion in action. Ultimately, I believe this will be decided at the ballot box in 2020 by you, by me, by all of us in this country, getting this country back on the right track. Thank you for the question.
Just one more as we begin at the outset. This is election is really about electing someone who's electable. And so in that regard, what is your, and we're not coordinating him to win the primary, but assuming you win the primary, what would be your electoral college strategy so that we can take back the White House?
I want to reiterate that whoever that nominee is, we all must get behind her, we all must get behind him, make them successful, not just against Trump, but ready to hit the ground running with the country behind them in January of 2021. I will add to that our ability to campaign in a state which before 2018 was thought too red to matter, which never had a seat at the table come November, and maybe you know what that feels like in South Carolina. We were able to put Texas in play. There are 38 electoral college votes in that state, have always been spoken for or written off, conceded before the race ever began. The race that I got to be part of in 2018, I was just part of something absolutely exceptional, unseen in my lifetime in our state, that brought people out at record numbers, enlarged the electorate, as I said earlier, helped to bring so many over the finish line. We can compete in Texas for those 38 electoral college votes, but I want to make sure that we compete everywhere for everyone. I just saw Tom Bias, I don't know if he's still here, but as a national farm leader, he reminded me in a phone call last week that our party used to be the party for the little gal and the little guy, the small business owner, the farmer, the producer, the rancher, making sure that a concentration of power and wealth and privilege did not set up an unfair playing field so that everybody had a chance to get ahead. The school teacher working 2 or 3 jobs right now, she may be a Republican, she may live in a rural community, she needs to know that we are fighting for her, and she will never know that if we do not show up in the first place. So no city too big or too blue or too small or too red for us to show up, to listen to, learn from the people we wish to serve, and fight for their votes, every single one of those votes. So thanks for the point.
Microphone. I ask that you keep your question kind of brief so that Beto can answer it as comprehensively as he can with this short time.
Oh, she's going to. Oh, just if they raise their hand, we'll go phone. And they'll come here.
So if you have a question, come over here. Raise your hand. Who has it? She'll pick you out and line you up. We get a microphone over there. You can come over here. While that's being organized, I want to recognize the principal of this school, Ms. Swinton. Can you stand up and raise her husband, Reverend Dr. Swinton, her husband. First question.
Sir, can you tell us your name and then ask your question?
My name is Ron Alexander. I'm a veteran. I'm a patient.
My name
is Ron Alexander. I'm a veteran and I'm a patient and volunteered to be a hospital. And I'm very concerned about the privatization, the attempted privatization by this president. It will mean the premature deaths of tens of thousands of poor veterans. And that's my question. Will you help stop privatization?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for your service. Your service and the future service of the 4 gentlemen that I just met from the Citadel. The women and men who have their lives on the line tonight, where it is already tonight in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Somalia, in Yemen, in Libya, all the places that we are at war, in some of those places, 27 years and counting in Iraq, 18 years and counting in Afghanistan, an obligation to those who came back from war more than 50 years ago, a war that we did not celebrate, a war that we did not congratulate them for fighting, and nonetheless, those Americans who served in Vietnam came back to Charleston, to El Paso, got to work, raised their families, started their businesses, contributed to their community's success. And to the gentleman's point, if you think about all of that service by which they distinguished themselves and the fact that we are losing 20 veterans a day, and that's a conservative estimate, every single day by their own hand, 16 of those 20 unable, for whatever reason, unwilling to go into a VA to treat that PTSD that they've been carrying since Vietnam, the traumatic brain injury that they endured in Afghanistan, that military sexual trauma was a consequence of their service. We are not fulfilling our obligation in El Paso. Our VA, when I was sworn in, ranked dead last in the country for mental health care wait times. I knew that care deferred became care denied, produced tragic outcomes. The deaths of my fellow El Pasoans, the most heroic people I could ever hope to know. We worked with the local community. We ensured that no differences would divide us, and we brought that VA together. We went from 68 full-time mental health care employees at the VA, and by investing in it, we were just under 120 full-time mental health care employees. We no longer rank dead last. Some days we are achieving better than the national average. I took ideas from town hall meetings like these, from questions like yours, and sought to improve health care for veterans nationally. I learned that veterans who return with an other than honorable discharge, many of them feel as though they were pushed into that status so that the Army, when they were no longer convenient, could get rid of them. By U.S. law, they were precluded from setting foot in a VA where their lives could literally be saved, and we were losing them at twice the rate of the general veterans population. I wrote a bill, the Honor Our Commitment Act, following the advice and the guidance that I received from veterans in El Paso. That bill was going to go nowhere as a member of the minority in the Democratic Party in a Republican-controlled institution unless I could find a partner with whom I could work. If I came back to a town hall like this and said, folks, we wrote the perfect piece of legislation, but those darn Republicans won't get out of the way. They don't love our veterans as much as I do or as Democrats do. My constituents would have called BS on me, as they should, fearing their judgment and respecting their intelligence. I found Republican colleagues with whom I could work. We prevailed upon our other colleagues, said, yes, it will cost more to guarantee mental health care access to those veterans denied it today, but it is a cost worth paying, a burden worth bearing. Yes, there should be a consequence for the status of your discharge, but that consequence cannot be your life. And after months of work, we were able to get this bill to the floor of the House of Representatives, and it passed 435 to 0. Passed in the Senate, signed into law by President Trump, someone with whom I agree on almost nothing, but we were able to find enough common ground and common cause to get this done. So the long answer to your question is yes, I believe in the VA. Yes, I know that there are more than 45,000 positions funded, authorized, unfilled, short today. We've got to prioritize the funding and the filling of those positions so that we get more veterans into more appointments, better outcomes, more lives saved. That is the only way to demonstrate that we have your back and that we are grateful for your service. Thank you for the question.
My question is, with all this, these Democratic candidates running youth while having for worker and as such, if one of you is eliminated, will you, and if we do end up coming with a nominee, can we as Democrats can trust you all to support that candidate, and will you have to full back end support throughout the process to the White House?
Yes. And furthermore, I'll take this pledge. I hope that we all will. Whoever you support, whoever you ultimately get behind, if you have not made a decision yet, let us do nothing that compromises that future nominee's potential to defeat President Trump. Let's do nothing to compromise their ability to bring this country together. So refraining from personal attacks, making this about not who we are against or who we contrast ourselves with, but what we are for, our ambitions, our aspirations, instead of our fear, our meanness, our pettiness, and the partisanship. Not only do I think that's the best way for us to win, I think it may be the only way for us in which to serve, to bring the country together again. So thank you for your commitment to service and for your question today. Appreciate you coming on today.
What would you
mentioned earlier that I started the day with Low Country Students for Political Action. Students who, beyond their aspirations and the big things that they want to achieve, are actually taking action right now. Tomorrow, they are organizing a march, a gathering, to ensure that we focus on the very question that you just asked. And I'm sure that one of them can tell us more so that we can all be there tomorrow. But it is a reminder that of any significant change that we have benefited from in this country, it has been thanks to the very youngest often among us. I mentioned being in Rock Hill, being a member of the Friendship Nine. Willie McLeod was very young, not too much older than you, when he had the almost unbelievable courage of sitting at a lunch counter where he knew he was going to be humiliated in front of his friends, fellow citizens, and fellow Americans. Knew he was going to be dragged out for sitting at a lunch counter. Knew that he was going to be jailed, and knew ahead of time that he was going to refuse to post bail so that he could help to get your attention, your conscience, so this country could do something right. Those freedom riders who took their lives in their own hands in the Deep South on those Greyhound buses. The Greensboro Four, who also sat at those lunch counters at some great peril to themselves and their lives. Those who lost their lives in the civil rights marches and struggles and actions. It is to them we owe our thanks more than to Lyndon Baines Johnson or the members of the Senate and the House who voted for the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in the 1960s. In much that same way, if we were to squarely face the fact that we lose more than 30,000 of our fellow Americans to gun violence each and every year until we change, a number not seen in any other developed modern country, we either accept that there is something wrong with us, inherently violent or evil, or we understand this is a human cause problem with a human solution. Your advocacy for universal background checks without exception, closing the Charleston loophole, and discontinuing the sale of weapons which were designed, engineered, initially sold to the United States military for the express purpose of killing people as effectively, efficiently, and as great a number as possible. That will make us safer. Only you and your fellow students will form the pressure that produces the political will that will get us to act. So please keep it up. We are going to be following your lead. Thank you very much for being here. Morning.
I'm here in Charleston today. My name is Kevin Shit. I'm a recent graduate of the Charleston School of Law. One of my concerns is, higher education, affordability of education, particularly the public service forgiveness loan. I know that's at risk right now with the current administration. What can you do to ensure high affordability and to ensure that the public service forgiveness loan will stay intact?
Great question. You probably know this number. It's staggering and it's hard to wrap your head around. $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt in the United States of America today. That's more than all the credit card debt that we hold combined and added up. Average graduating senior from a college has $40,000 on their back. That's an average. Some have tens of thousands more. It's also a drag on them and their families, because it is the one kind of debt that you will never shake until you pay it off or until you are in the grave. We're adding to that debt every year with every graduate. And so my first order of business is to stop digging the hole. Let's make sure that you are both college ready when you graduate from Burke and you are career ready when you graduate from Burke. Let's make sure that if you want to join one of these unions, become an apprentice, ultimately a journeyman, commanding wages of $25, $30, and more an hour, that you're able to do that. We put you on a path to a career, a trade, and success. Let's make sure that if you want to go to community college, you go without paying a single dime and incurring a penny of debt. Let's make sure that if you want to go to a publicly financed, public-facing, public-serving four-year institution, you also do not take on debt. Is it expensive? Depends on how you look at it. It'll cost us a little bit up front, but it will produce a return far greater than that initial investment over the lifetime of every beneficiary. And ultimately, this country becomes a beneficiary of the things that you will now be able to do, what you were born for, realize thanks to the education that you receive. Those who are carrying that debt right now, I want to make sure that we make it a little bit easier on you. You mentioned the loan forgiveness program. If you're willing to take one of those unfilled positions at the VA, deliver for one of those women or men who has already sacrificed so much, I want to wipe clear your debt because of what you're willing to do for this country. If you're willing to teach school in a community that needs more human capital, your talent, and your drive, I want to make sure that we refinance or wipe clean your debt. The president, as you have just mentioned, in his latest budget, doesn't wipe clean the debt of those students. He wipes clean the loan forgiveness program itself, takes money away from federally backed, federally financed student loans, our ability to refinance at lower rates. And you know where he's going to send that money? To my hometown. To build a 2,000-mile, 30-foot high, $30 billion wall at a time of record low apprehensions and record high security. El Paso, Texas, one of the safest cities in the United States of America, not in spite, but because we are a city of immigrants. Let's make sure that our budgets reflect our values, our morals, and the opportunities that we have in front of us. Thank you. Yes, twice over, but I also want to add, when we're talking about bringing forth the genius of this country, let's acknowledge that in many states, most of them formerly of the Confederacy, you have people who forever have been blocked from attempting to vote. The first chapter of the NAACP in the state of Texas was founded in El Paso. Dr. Lawrence Nixon paid his poll tax, took the receipt to the ballot box in 1924, and was refused the right to vote in what was then the all-white Democratic primary in our state. Much like South Carolina, the Democratic Party was dominant. Whoever won that nomination would be your next governor. He took that case to the Supreme Court twice, waited 20 years, walked into that same polling place in 1944, finally able to vote. For 20 years, Texas lost out not just on him, his voice, and his vote, but millions of other of our fellow citizens. In Texas today, you can use your ID, your license to carry a firearm to prove who you are at the ballot box. You cannot use your student ID at Texas Southern University to prove who you are at the ballot box. There is a reason that we are 50th, or we're 50th in the country in voter turnout. So a new Voting Rights Act, same-day voter registration, ending the practice of gerrymandering. Members of Congress should not be choosing their own voters. It should work the other way around. All of that makes our democracy stronger. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Alexi. As a Hispanic adult recipient, many Democrats have made empty promises for us. How can you assure to us that you're not going to make those empty promises?
Alexa, thank you for being here. Short story that provides some context, some emotion that we can all connect to beyond the facts and figures, as we're up against a president who has maliciously used emotion, tying dreamers to MS-13, fears of gangs coming into our schools and killing our kids, describing asylum seekers as an infestation. That might be a word that they used in the Third Reich to describe other human beings. It's not a word that we use in America to describe other human beings. In World War I, more than 100 years ago, in my hometown of El Paso, Texas, there was an undocumented immigrant whom we today might call a dreamer named Marcelino Serna. When this country entered the war, he entered the United States Army. When his drill sergeant found out that he was not a citizen, did not have status, he said, Serna, every man in this unit is going to France, but not every man will come back home. You don't have to do this. This isn't your fight. Like any good American, Serna said, no way, I'm signing up and I'm going. He came back, the most highly decorated veteran from the entire state of Texas in the entirety of World War I. I want to make clear that dreamers, more than 1 million strong, born in another country, but just as American as anyone else in any way matters, are not just the students in our classrooms, they're the teachers in our classrooms. They're not just being defended by those service members deployed overseas, they are those service members deployed overseas. This country of asylum seekers and refugees and immigrants from the world over, if we lose sight of who we are, the foundation of our strength, our success, and yes, our safety and our security, we will lose sight of that at our peril to everything that matters to us. So to your question, free every dreamer from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens now in this country. Allow them to contribute to their full potential. Do it not at the price of their parents, the original dreamers, at the cost of a wall or militarizing our communities. Allow our immigration laws to reflect our values, our communities, who we are, the best traditions of America, and the brightest future possible. Thank you, Alexi. Appreciate it.
Good morning. I'm Diane Hamilton, a retired educator. I am concerned about the encroachment of the executive branch on the legislative branch. How will you, as our president, serve to protect the division of power that was created by our founders, like in the Madisonian vision? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. There are so many examples that we can cite that illustrate your concern, but perhaps the most important, the gravest of them all, is the fact that we are at war all over the world with no definition of victory, no commonly understood strategy to achieve that victory, and no real comprehension of the cost that we are already paying in the lives that have served and have been sacrificed, and in the lives that have been taken by our fellow Americans in our name. The trillions of dollars added to the debt, $1 trillion will be added to the debt by deficit spending, in part connected to these wars this year. I made the case, I hope, of the cost borne by those who come back, the lives that we are losing, PTSD and TBI not treated today. And as we all understand from our reading of the Constitution, the power to go to war is reserved to you, to your representatives in Congress, not to the president. And yet, since 9/11, there's been no meaningful discussion or debate in the House of Representatives or the Senate about ending the authorization for the use of military force that underpins our presence, not just in Afghanistan, but every one of those other countries that I have mentioned. It is war without end. It is war that continues to metastasize from one country to the next. If Congress will not jealously guard its prerogatives and its responsibilities, I guarantee you we will continue to have these kinds of wars and this kind of sacrifice. One note of hope. There is a woman in the United States Congress named Barbara Lee, represents a district in Oakland, California. Born in El Paso, Texas, and coincidentally her mother helped to integrate higher education in our state and at Texas Western College in specific. In 2001, after the attacks, as Congress was voting for a declaration of war, this authorization for the use of military force, there was one lone member of Congress to vote against it. And I remember listening to the radio on my way home from work that day, wondering who is this unpatriotic, un-American, weak person who doesn't want to go to war and get those who have gotten us. It was Barbara Lee. In the time that I've had to get to know her, to actually watch the speech via the C-SPAN archive, to read her words, you can tell that it is a momentous decision, incredibly difficult decision. She wants to make sure that this country does the right thing for reasons of justice, reasons to prevent another attack on this country, but she says, I do not want this country to write a blank check for war. 18 years in, how precious Barbara Lee was. If we can follow her example, and there are Republicans who now agree with her as well as Democrats, then I think we can get control of an out-of-control executive branch, out-of-control wars that we are waging, out-of-control deficit spending that adds to an out-of-control national debt. We need to make sure that all of us, including members of Congress, are stepping up to do their part, and that all of us who put these people in positions of public trust hold them accountable and responsible for their actions and their responsibilities. Thank you for asking the question. I appreciate it. Very grateful.
Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you all for helping us out. Really appreciate it, Charleston.
Beto, 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 Beto.